Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Welcome on a special guest, friend of the show, Kevin Bowen from The Fan. Kevin, man, how are you doing? I know you came in with the Irish stuff on. How are you feeling about Monday, man, before we jump into this?
Yes, I am an unapologetic, psychotic probably is a better way to put it, Notre Dame fan. So I'm excited, really just second time in my lifetime they've ever been in this game. So to have that opportunity to play for it, I think as a fan, Colts fans, whether it's 09 or 06, certainly you have those chances. And I can't wait. I get that Ohio State is very, very good and favored by, 8 for a reason, but Notre Dame's also a pretty good football team. So I can't wait to experience it all.
I'm sure it's refreshing after what you've had to witness this past season with Indy. So, but yeah, Kevin, speaking of Indy, talking about Chris Ballard, right? I feel like we have a similar conversation to the conversation we're going to have today, all about kind of the roster construction process the Colts have or have not really made in their favor the last number of years. Is it going to change? Is Chris Ballard going to change his approach? Well, he had his end-of-the-year presser, I think just about a week ago. He had his end-of-the-year presser, and it definitely felt like in certain ways Chris Ballard said some things that we're not typically used to him saying at the end of the year. We all know the phrase, we're this close, we're not that far away. Chris Ballard did not say that at all in regards to the roster, talking about the fact that team run it back was not the solution last year, that obviously the need to add competition and stuff in potentially in free agency as well. Closing some of those deals, I believe is how Ballard said it. So from your impression of that press conference, do you see the Colts potentially, I guess, how do you view what Chris Ballard said versus what his actions might be here in the next couple months in regards to actually adding outside talent into your building, right? I think he called it fresh blood into your building.
Yeah, there are a couple different points, Cody, where I thought he indirectly or more directly pointed to a different free agency plan. You brought up a lot of it right there, better identifying the guys that fit us and then finishing off those deals. To put in football terms, you can't just get to the 3-yard line. You got to be able to get it, into the end zone. And, I think back to Danico Autry's free agency, for example, with Tennessee of, again, you're Cody Felger and, you play for whatever the Texans and I assign a value as Chris Ballard of $6.2 million and your agent says, well, no, he's getting offered whatever, 6.6 over here. Can you match it? And Ballard saying, nope, I'm stringent. This is my value. Take it or leave it. Like you just have to be flexible. It's a part of free agency business, as messy as it can be at times. So again, that overall tune was different. You didn't hear the caution flags of, hey, when you pay a player that type of money, the message you're sending into your locker room, things like that. So I just think all of that.
Can I have some cereal?
Yeah. Hand it to me. Sorry, we got a cereal break here. And then the other thing that I thought stood out to me was a little bit later in the presser about, him mentioning we need some more tough guys. Don't know if you ever were a fan of the Chex Mix cereal back in the day, Cody, but nonetheless, we're going to refill the bowl. Okay. I thought his tough guys comment late also really stood out to me. I mean, that's a big phrase to use to describe football players. And when you say something to the effect of, we don't have enough tough guys to win those late season games. It's a big statement. I think it's a harsh statement. You can make the argument it's an accurate statement. Now, again, he's the one picking those guys. So, and I think one other thing I'd add, Cody, is there's this misnomer of you either swing for the fences or you don't swing at all. Last year, for example, the, rumored reported moves, included a pursuit of Danielle Hunter and then, obviously the trade up with the Giants. Well, yes, let's say you didn't get whatever, that stud pass catcher or that stud edge rusher, but you can still make B and C and D level moves that, is not just you either swing and get a home run or you don't even get on base. No, you can get a single or a double or try for that. So I think that's another thing to remember too, of just because, again, you hit on whatever plan A is, there still needs to be other plans. And last year I thought it had way too much of we're trying, but then we're just going to stop if it doesn't work out. It's like, no. You can still make some other moves that can obviously try and kind of bolster your roster. Maybe not that level, but it still does something for you.
I think that's what the most frustrating thing about how Chris Ballard has approached the roster is. He's had some of those moves, and you see like the Xavier Rhodes of the world, the Rodney McLeods, those type of guys that aren't these like A-plus, home run guys, but they were key components of winning football for a while, and they played at a pretty high level. So you just kind of see that kind of stuff, and it makes you wonder, why have the Colts kind of stopped doing that the last couple of years? I mean, even Samson Ebukam as of recently. I know he had the injury. We'll have to see on that, but that wasn't like this 100% Danielle Hunter swing type of guy, but he went out there and nearly had 10 sacks for you when he was healthy. So I always have found myself puzzled why Chris Ballard has not done that more, and the Colts have not done that more in terms of just not even adding A talent, but adding, like you said, B, C talent. Just some guys in there to create some competition, which Ballard was very obviously critical of himself, of basically just kind of handing guys stuff when it comes to some starting positions. I mean, I felt like when we talked about different training camp battles this last year, it wasn't really a lot of starting guys competing for spots. It was a lot of who's going to fill in the back end, who's going to fill in the depth spots, and there wasn't a ton of competition. So I don't know. I've always wondered, and I've always kind of been puzzled by that approach, Kevin.
Yeah, and one thing too is like, and I don't think Ballard's words have necessarily said this, but it's like you just can't over rely on early hits in the draft. I certainly understand wanting to have your core through the draft. It makes a lot of sense. But expecting instant gratification from those guys, boy, that's a bit far-fetched. For every Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard and Braden Smith, there's draft classes like 2017 or 2019 or, probably some of the recent draft classes. If you look at two guys that you would say had really nice seasons this year, Cody, you'd say Alec Pierce and Nick Cross. Well, they're in the third years. They didn't give you that in year one or year two. So just the over-reliance on what is a crapshoot. And I think Ballard has admitted that, of like, that's why he trades back so much. He's like, give me more darts to throw at the dartboard. That has also been a bit puzzling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also kind of trying to figure out, obviously we don't know who the Colts are going to bring in a defensive coordinator, but could we see some moves there, whether in terms of guys being shipped out, new guys being brought in? I guess what do you think, based off of the type of candidates the Colts have brought in, a lot of veteran guys that have been in the league for a while, and a lot of guys that have focused primarily in their times as coaches on the defensive backs. And obviously Chris Ballard's talked about that as well. So what do you kind of expect without knowing who the coach is? Do you see an emphasis the Colts making really in that secondary, I suppose, or what do you potentially see them doing in regards to adding some competition on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I am going to be super intrigued what happens back there with the new defensive coordinator. And just in general, what personnel changes or tweaks do you see with the new defensive coordinator? You look at some of these candidates, generally, there's certainly an uptick in aggression. Some of them a huge uptick in blitzing. And when you blitz more, inevitably you got to leave your guys on islands. And these corners weren't necessarily drafted to be on islands. And, let's rewind it, 9 months, Cody. What was the biggest need everybody seemingly wanted in round one? It was corner. Yep. Okay, what's transpired at corner since then? I think Jalen Jones is still a nice piece. Kenny Moore will turn 30 now later this year. And Juju Brents, unfortunately, has only had more injuries. So when you add up all of that, isn't corner still a big need? And that's not even taking account, like this could be a very different defense moving forward. I think those things are at play of if corner is this big of a need, or was at least 9 months ago, I would argue maybe it's only grown, especially if the defensive system is going to be more reliant on, hey, we need to contribute bodies to whatever, a blitz or a pass rush. We're going to leave more of our corners on islands. And man, you got to have some studs back there. So that is something that I'll be watching.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Kevin, when it comes to that. Could you see the Colts? This is one thing I've kind of wondered, because we saw teams attack the Colts so much over the middle. It felt like it was almost like a routine thing. If you're attacking the Colts defense, go for the middle. And EJ Speed obviously is a free agent. You have some guys that have played some snaps, but really outside of Jalen Carlisle, who you missed a good chunk of the season, you don't really have a guy that excels in coverage. So could you see the Colts potentially looking to add, it maybe via free agency? I know, one of the hot names right now is Dre Greenlaw from San Francisco. Could you see them adding a player like that who really does excel in that coverage standpoint to really help them out, bolster that middle a little bit and make it a lot more difficult, I suppose, with being more aggressive, in terms of what opposing tight ends and guys over the middle do against you?
Yeah, linebacker will be another one, Cody, that I think is interesting just because Ballard has drafted he's really been historically good in drafting linebackers all throughout the draft. And, again, was that for that specific system or those specific systems? Will that continue if you do have a change? They have obviously had a very, very specific body type and what they want out of those linebackers. Again, is that going to be a difference under the new scheme? When you look at the current free agent class, I'd argue Ryan Kelly to Tanner Bortolini is really the only obvious passing of the torch. I don't think there's one there at safety for Julian Blackmon. I don't really know if there's one there for Dayo Adangbo, really, even on the defensive line. I get you have bodies up there, but I think Adangbo's a little different in just how versatile he can be. And then at linebacker, theoretically, EJ Speed for Jalen Carlisle would be that. So I'm curious, if I were going to rank the needs, I don't know if I have linebacker maybe as high as the others just because they have typically found answers there. For the most part, I certainly need better play. And the tackling was obviously a massive issue this season. But that is one that I don't think there's a great read on it just because a lot of it will be scheme dependent. And then certainly it's a position that they've drafted well. And, I thought Carlisle in flashes had some nice moments. So, do you look at him and say, hey, second year jump, now we probably should point out he hadn't played that position before. He had been a collegiate defensive back as well.
Yeah, I guess my biggest question is, if you're serious about the competition, does it make sense to,
Sure.
not that you would necessarily be doing this, but, not adding some competition in there at the other linebacker spot? Again, I know you have some guys that could come in and fill in at depth purposes, but would it make sense for the Colts to try to add a guy in there that is more of a proven guy? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just kind of curious on that with Carl Eyes, especially because, like you said, he is very new to the position. So do you just hand him that, or do you say, all right, got to go earn it a little bit more? So, any other positions, Kevin, that when you're looking at, maybe I know Chris Ballard, probably is a little bit higher on the D line than a lot of people were, but any other positions on the defense or even on moving over to the offense that you would like to see the Colts add some serious competition to, via free agency, especially some guys you'd like to see them add more of those proven guys to push some guys for some positions?
Yeah, safety. I think you got to kind of throw that in there, and then offensively. Ballard did mention kind of middle of the field as something that, he wants to see. I think tight end is probably the biggest one that we all come back to. I would argue pass catching running back. I think you felt that in kind of wild card weekend a little bit. I know that Ty Johnson play was obviously a big one in that Buffalo game, but he's been key for them. It's not just all on James Cook with the Bills. So those two areas, O-line, it's such a big Ballard belief that you got to think it's going to get some attention. And what's Ryan Kelly? What's Braden Smith? Those two are, again, do you just hand them to Matt Gonzalez and Tanner Bortolini? Are they coming back? Are they not? That's one that could, when's the last time the Colts have had, and I assume Will Fries will be brought back, but that was a season ending injury. When's the last time the Colts have had 2 to maybe 3 different starting offensive linemen from one year to the next? That hasn't happened in a while. So those are probably some positions that stick out. But again, I keep on coming back to Ballard specifically saying offensively, it's the middle of the field. Okay. What is that? Is that purely tight end? Obviously there's some quarterback accuracy that has to help out in that area, but that would be one that I'm keeping an eye on.
You'd mentioned quarterback, so I just got to go there because I know there's been some popular names around that. And Chris Ballard has not been shy about, adding some competition in there for Anthony Richardson. So could you see the Colts going via the free agency route to bring in a guy that's not a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, but somebody who could truly come in and is not necessarily going to be the quote-unquote backup guy to AR, right? He's not going to be the guy that clearly isn't in competition, but could step in a pinch like Minshew, like, a Joe Flacco did. Could you see them adding, I know a guy like Justin Fields is kind of a big popular name around Colts fans right now and around the media even. Could you see the Colts adding somebody like that to not just say we brought in a guy, but a guy that could truly be your starter? I mean, week 1, could you bring in a guy like that? Who would that be in your mind? Would it be via free agency or would it be the draft for you?
Yeah, quarterback one, I think I'm really, really torn on is like what makes the most sense. You brought out the, week 1 starter. Obviously, that's going to take some serious investment to find that guy. Do you look at it and think, well, should we go heavy mentor? Probably the devil's advocate would say Anthony Richardson hasn't earned that. Like, it went Drew Stanton to Matt Hasselbeck with Andrew Luck, kind of that. Because I thought Flacco wanted no part of that. And that's fine. That's how, Flacco's been a starter really throughout his career. That's how some guys are wired. Stylistically, do you want the same as Richardson or do you want different? I could listen to both of those cases. And then lastly, I don't think you'd go the draft, but, would you look at all in the draft? So, Fields is the name I keep on coming back to. Then again, if I'm Justin Fields, there's part of me that's like, well, I got a pretty good situation here in Pittsburgh. Why would I want, to entertain that, with Russell Wilson's age? So that is probably the route I would go. Like someone brought up earlier to me, like a Tyrod Taylor. He's still under contract with the Jets. Does he kind of appease a little bit of the, hey, he's a veteran, but also, in a spot, situation, he could help you out. So that would probably be something that. Sorry, we're now pouring Legos under the table here. That would probably be something that you would look into. But, there's this general philosophy I've always had, Cody, and you and I have had this conversation of just the Band-Aid quarterback is just not going to get it done. And I get that some teams are backed into that corner at times. But, I'm a huge believer in how do you create the 5 to 7 year window. and you create that window via draft and develop. I don't think it's any secret that the same 4 AFC teams are the 4 finalists again this season, and all 4 of them drafted those guys. And look, they were all drafted in very different spots. 3 of the 4 teams had significant trade ups I guess all 4, now that I think about it, had a trade up. I guess Houston's trade up was actually for Will Anderson Jr., but the other 3 certainly had some big trade ups to get those guys. So there is also a part of me that's like, don't really invest in the backup, because if it goes bad, you want to borderline tank and you want to get a top 5 pick. You don't want to be drafting 14th overall. And that's a very loser mentality to have. I can't see them doing that, especially in a year that you would assume all of them are on the hot seat. Typically, if your owner has to put out, we're bringing our coach and GM back, that means you're on the hot seat for the next season. That would be something that I'm also kind of thinking about.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Kevin, we'll have to see what happens here. Again, free agency is still some months away here, and obviously we don't even know who the Colts have hired at defensive coordinator yet. So a lot needs to happen between now and then, but do appreciate your time and coming on a little bit. What have you been working on here recently with the Fan? I know you do stuff with the morning show and everything like that, but what's some stuff that folks can check out on your site?
Yeah, some written content up on 1075thefan.com. I always do these annual series where I kind of go back and grade the season, give out season awards, evaluate, the GM and the head coach. So some of that is posted. Some of that will continue to post here in the month of January. So that's up on 1075thefan.com.
Awesome. Well, guys, be sure to go check that out. Kevin, do appreciate you. As always, we'll have to do it again soon. And who knows, maybe we'll be talking about a new defensive coordinator and potentially a new free agency philosophy. I guess we'll have to see. But appreciate you, Kev. We'll have to do it again soon.
Cody, as always, thank you, man. Thanks for bearing with the background noise.
No worries. Appreciate you, man. And yeah, man, go be a dad. Hey, that's the most important thing. So appreciate you, dude. And we'll do it again.
Thank you, sir.